to our Survive and Thrive series of webinars. We've now, I think we're up to number 5 webinars now, which has been really, really good. Today's webinar is around understanding your obligations with payroll and rostering rules. And the reason why we've decided to do this webinar is because we know that we're in a pandemic. We know that there are some businesses out there that have had to make some really tough decisions, and our hearts go out to them. We know that there are businesses out there that are trying to stay in business, and they're doing everything they can during this tough period to survive. However, what we've found is when we've asked questions to some of our clients, they have thrown, if I use the word, all the compliance or most of the compliance out the window. They are just doing what they can to hang in there and survive, and I totally get that. But my concern is when things change and we get back to business, because some business owners haven't followed the right process, then this could be really, this could really hurt them. So I really hope you value the webinar that we've done. We will touch on things such as a couple of government initiatives, such as the JobKeeper allowance and stuff like that. But even through all of these government incentives, initiatives that are coming out, we still, as business owners, need to make sure that we comply with the compliance of our obligations. Okay, so let me take you through this webinar. Today's webinar, I'm also joined with one of our HR specialists, Alison Fletcher, who is part of this webinar. And we have Smaritha, who is behind the scenes looking at people's questions that they submit. And we'll try our very, very best to answer those questions at the end of this webinar. However, if we don't, what my team have been doing is contacting the customers who have been on our webinars and making sure that, are they okay? Do you need some guidance or some help? Okay, so today's webinar, we're going to discuss, and you will discover the following. We're going to go back and talk about modern awards, and we just picked the one particular award, which is the Understanding of the General Retail Award. The reason why we've picked that is because there's still conditions and compliances that need to fall under that award, including things like rostering, pay rates, and so on, which we'll cover. And we thought, you know, when Alison and I brainstormed this, the Clerks Private Sector Award, there's been some new changes of this award, and there are other changes coming out with awards, and we just want to educate people so they get their head around what's actually changing and the reasons why. We still want to go back to the good old basics of the National Employment Standards, because as a business, you know, you need to comply with this NES system, and we've already seen, you know, people who have been reactive, that haven't followed, and making decisions for survival, which again, I want to reiterate, might cost them dearly later down the track. We think it's really important that we cover the rostering rules. You know, we believe that most people understand how to roster. Right, and we don't want to offend anybody that's on this webinar. However, one of the things that's highlighted to us is in these times, the rostering rules have gone out the window. People are doing what they need to do to survive, and there are conditions if you want to do that, which we'll explain through this webinar. Annualised salaries was a big topic that was talked about in January, February, and came out into effect as of the 1st of March. And again, we want to reiterate that you make sure that you're compliant with this with your annualised salary staff. So we know some retailers out there and some other businesses have moved casuals on and part-time, and they're getting their annualised salary staff to do more hours, but we want to make sure that you understand that there's still conditions and they can't be disadvantaged. And then I'll finish off with you know, your obligations as an employer with payroll and rostering under this COVID-19 conditions that we're currently in. Okay, so let's just get into it. Just a bit of housekeeping. This webinar will be recorded, and within 24 hours, you will receive, and everyone who's registered for this webinar will receive, a copy of this webinar, as well as the slide deck and some supporting material that I'm going to refer to throughout the webinar. Everyone will be muted, and if people have some questions All they need to do is put those questions in the question box, and Maritha is going to highlight to me some of these questions, and which we will try very hard to answer at the end of this webinar. Okay, about myself. For those that don't know me, I'm the owner of Key Business Advisors, and I'm very passionate about what we do. We've been operating for 12 years. We're all about helping people with the business advice in growing their business, putting some strategies in place around their people, their marketing, all the things that they need to do to grow, and their processes. And we also are a business that is an outsourced HR business, where we have a team of professional HR advisors who help, guide, support and advise all of our clients on what to do to keep their business running when it comes to managing staff. So I have Alison who's joined me. Just want to say a quick hello, Alison.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah, beautiful. And Alison's, Alison's absolutely fantastic, like all of my HR advisors in this business. And I've got her under what's the word? Under a bit of pressure in doing these webinars, because this is something that I guess it's fairly new to a lot of businesses. We're all going through a bit of change. Okay, a bit about our business. Our mission, we've been going for 12 years. Our mission has always been, how do we take business from good to great? How do we get a business to the next level? And right now, I think that's part of the reason why we've created our Survive and Thrive campaign, is because to try and help businesses to stay in business and keep their people employed. And of course, our purpose is to take our customers on a journey to help them improve their business through all aspects of employee engagement and performance. And I'm sure if Alison and I opened up and shared some of the stories and some of the conversations we've had in the past 2 weeks, that in itself, I could write a book on what to do and also what not to do. So let me get into our first topic, which is around modern awards. So just understanding how they work, and we're going to choose the Retail Industry Award because it is a complicated award, and if people have never read an award, it's this particular award is 77 pages long. There's lots of interpretation, and what I encourage my team to do is, when they're talking to our customers, is how do you simplify what some of the meanings and terminologies are in these awards. So if I just break it down, and I'm going to show you the General Retail Industry Award in a sec. Part 1 is about application and operation. So do they, are you a retailer, and how that all works. The consultation and dispute resolution, should things in talking to your employees, type of employment and terms of termination of employment, classifications around wage rates, and then part 5, as you'll see, is ordinary hours of work, which I'll touch on. Then there's things like leave, public holidays, and things like, for an example, allowances and so on. And then towards the end of the Retail Award, there's a part 7, which is schedules between A to H, and these are those schedules of what's in the actual award. So if you have a lot of time on your hands and you want to become an expert at understanding an award, then definitely you need to read it. And we always encourage our customers to read the award so they understand how things work. Okay, so if I just going to take you to the General Retail Award. So we're looking at one right now. So I'm hoping that you can see this on my screen. And what you've got here is a General Retail Award, and this is what the body of it is. And you can go into the Fair Work website, and you can actually download this award, and it can be live right in front of you. So if I just sit back, you'll see here that it also links to the National Employment Standards and this award, which I'll get to in a sec, because we're going to cover that. But if we just go down, I'm just going to scroll down to the categories. So employment categories, part-time, full-time. It will also give you what a level 1 classification employee looks like. So if I just go and click on classifications, this is where I want to focus. What you'll see here is the minimum wages. So this is pretty easy to follow and easy to understand. But for me, one of the things that I always get into conversation with lots of retailers is what constitutes a level 1 and what's the skill level expectation of a level 1 versus a level 8. So maybe I'll just hand over to Alison. If you can give us your version on that, that would be fantastic.
Thanks, Cole. So a level 1 employee would be somebody who is a beginner, is somebody who's starting off, and obviously as you go up the levels, the more highly skilled they are and the more responsibility they will have. For example, you might have an assistant manager who assists the manager who in the store, and then you've got a store manager who might be responsible for so many staff, and then there's different levels for the managers as well. So if you've got somebody on a level 1, they are not under their classification. They are not allowed to open or shut the store or count the till. Those responsibilities come up at a higher level. And again, if you've got someone at a level 8, obviously they can do anything. The one thing I would point out at this point is don't overcompensate for the staff. So, for example, if you have somebody in the middle, level 4 or level 5, don't elevate them to a level 8. You can pay them more if you want, but if you put them up and say that they're being, if they're on a level 8, then you have to meet all of the level 8 monetary obligations. So if they're working public holidays or penalty rates over the weekends, you have to pay at that particular level because that's what you stated you've employed them at. So I hope that makes a bit of sense.
And I think, Alison, what we're seeing is part of business survival is every man's on deck, everyone's doing what they can to help. And we know of some businesses where, staff are exhausted, let's face it. And we've got people who are a level 1 closing a store, counting tills, and this could come back later down the track to bite the business owner if they're not following the rules around the pay requirements. Am I right with what I've said?
Correct. So, and especially at the moment, you might have split your staff, and we can go into that a bit as we move on in the webinar. But there's nothing wrong for that particular employee to do tasks above their level. But if you do allow them to open, shut, or count till money, then you need to pay them for that particular level. So you can't keep them at the level that they're on, for example, level 1, and not pay them at the higher level. So you can ask them to do the higher duties, but then they need to be paid to compensate for that as well. So just make sure that you pay them at the correct rate.
The other thing too, Alison, is, and we're just going to be mindful to keep our speech slow because this is being recorded, but if I've got staff that are doing longer shifts, they're doing more than 38 hours in a week, again, they need to be paid for the extra hours that they're doing of overtime.
That's correct. So there's rostering rules, which I'll go into in a couple of slides' time, and that covers things as to how many hours a particular employee can work on any particular day.
Yep. Okay. I'm just going to move down to now also as well is making sure that during these times that you're also complying with the things such as the meal allowances and things. And we've done an audit with a retailer, and in that retailer they provide uniforms, but they don't provide any form of there was no uniform allowance on their pay slips. So maybe you can take us through this, the meal allowance and the special clothing that I'm just got up on the screen now. Yeah.
Okay, sure. So the meal allowance would come into effect if an employee is required to work more than an hour overtime after the employee's ordinary time of ending work. So, for example, if they've finished at 6 p.m. and the overtime is up until 7, then they're entitled to that meal allowance without being given, and that's without being given 24 hours notice as well. So either you can either provide them with a meal or give them a meal allowance, which in this case is $18.29, and any overtime work that exceeds 4 hours, a further meal allowance of $16.57 will also be paid. So just be mindful of that. So no meal allowance will be payable where an employee could reasonably return home for a meal within the period allowed as well. The special clothing allowance is where an employer requires an employee to wear any protective or special clothing, such as uniform, dress or other clothing. Then the employer will reimburse the employee for any cost of purchasing the clothing and replacement items under normal wear and tear. And this provision will not apply where the special clothing is supplied or paid by the employer. So a lot of employers actually provide their team members with uniforms, and in that case, they don't need to provide the special clothing allowance because they've already provided it for them.
Yeah, and there's also there's a laundry allowance as well, so we've got to make sure that they've covered that as well. Alison, we've just had a question that's come in based on what was said, and this is from Ursula. If a level 1 were to close 1 day a week in a retail store, and it's only that shift to be paid at the higher rate, the answer to that is correct. Is mine correct in saying that?
Correct. It would only be for the day that she would perform those higher duties for. So it's not the entire week, no.
Yeah, and again, this is all comes back to following the retail award and making sure that you got things right, and that's a great question. Just before I move on back to the slide presentation, another thing too has been that's come up is staff being paid when they're asked to come into work earlier for things like a startup meeting or a shift. Just to get things organised. Now, if they've been asked to come in earlier and participate in a meeting, whether that be half an hour earlier or 15 minutes earlier, should they be paid for that? And is that part of the rostering, the split rostering that some companies do so they don't have to pay that extra overtime?
The short answer is yes. The employee must be paid for all time spent at work. If they have been directed to come in for a meeting, so a startup meeting, as you just mentioned, they have to be paid for that. So there's no way around that. Fair Work are quite strict. That goes towards their hours that they've worked. So if you've rostered them on, for example, from 9 a.m., but you want a team huddle at 8:40, then you need to pay for that extra 20 minutes as well.
Yeah, I'm just going to throw one more out there before we move on to the next slide, Alison. But if I've actually calculated that into already in my salary and made a provision for that, and it's in the contracts, am I covered because I'm paying people an extra 20 minutes per day?
As long, and this is the tricky thing, as long as you have broken it down on the payslip. If it's not on the payslip, the employee could then put in a claim to Fair Work, and they could claim that they have not been compensated for that time, and then that could lead to the employer having to pay extra on top of what they've already paid. So my advice would be, and this is for salaried staff especially, break it down. Make sure that you have broken down all of the different elements on the payslip, and then you're better protected.
Okay, great. Okay, let's go and have a conversation now about the Clerks Private Sector Award, please.
Okay, so the Clerks Private Sector Award, there's just been an update to this from Fair Work Commission that came through last week. It's the first of what we hope to be many award changes, and that's as a result of the COVID-19 outbreak that we've been faced with. The awards as they stand are quite rigid to what employers are allowed to get their employees to do. And this change that has come into effect immediately is a temporary change. It's only up until June, at the end of June. And it changes things such as the employees' classifications and duties. A lot of businesses have reduced staff right now, and they might be asking staff to do things, perform duties outside of their normal role. So this now allows for that. Minimum engagement or pay for part-time and casual employees, and the span of hours for full-time employees while working at home. This one is really good, especially for working at home employees. They may also have to deal with a young family who are also caught at home, and they might need to change their span of hours around those other commitments. Until this change came through, if they did extra work or their work day outside of the ordinary span, it would automatically attract a penalty rate. So now there's a little bit more leeway there, which is really good for both the employee and the employer. Full-time and part-time employees' hours of work, you can have a temporary reduction of hours, and this is a really good one for employers who are struggling to meet their commitments with keeping their employees employed. So now you can have a reduction of hours and spread the load across your team and stretch out that payroll burden right across the team. And directions to take annual leave as well. So this was another one, unless you had an employee who had excessive leave, and even then you would need to ask them or give them 4 weeks notice. So now you don't have to do that under this temporary change, which is a real win for the employees as well. Thanks, Cole. So the next one is the new changes that continued, the operational flexibility, so change of duties. As I said, employees can now actually do duties, perform duties that were outside of their normal role, and it's given greater freedom for working from home, temporary reduction of hours, and annual leave. So this is just a breakdown of what I've just said. Thanks, Colin.
And I think, look, for those of you who want to know more information about that, I'm just going to quickly show you that we actually did a post on our website, and there it is. If you go to our blog section, there's more detail for you to learn more about that. And again, Stephanie, our HR manager, wrote that if you want any more clarification, then please don't hesitate to contact us. Okay, let's have a conversation around the National Employment Standards. So again, you know, employees in Australia have entitlements and protection at work under, this is part of the National Employment Standards, under the Fair Work laws, modern awards, you know, any enterprise or, you know, EBA agreements, employment contracts that are written, and pay conditions and national employment. And it's really important that you must comply with the National Employment Standards. And again, I want to reiterate that right now people are making quick decisions, rash decisions, and this could come back and hurt the employer. So if I just take you to the Fair Work Information Statement, and this is the updated Fair Work Information Statement, you'll see that, you know, what it links to: Fair Work laws, awards, enterprise agreements, and employment contracts. So if you've got things in your employment contracts and you now want to make some changes, and that's all been signed off, well, no, that's not, you can't do that. So I'm going to just give you one example. We've had a customer that's come in where the question was asked: I've got an employment contract, so this is a new client for us, and there are bonuses and commissions to be paid in that contract, and I don't want to pay them now, and now my staff are firing up. And go, well, hang on a sec, you put that into your contract, that you're obligated to pay that. So, and again, you know, people on this hookup might think, well, you know, that's totally unfair, but this is, you know, we don't advise that. We advise any bonuses or commissions, they're separate from your employment contract. So, you know, there are standards, there are employment standards that you need to meet and need to follow. And, you know, as I mentioned at the start of this webinar, we're here to help people and guide them and make sure they're getting the right advice so things don't come back and backfire down the track. But maybe, Alison, you can take me through this employment standards, this, you know, the 10 national employment standards as we see on this screen. Yeah,
sure. So this is actually a lot clearer with this new Fair Work information sheet that's come through. It's a lot easier to read compared to the previous versions. So as you can see on your screen, it's got a list of entitlements, and these are the minimum entitlements. It doesn't mean it's the maximum. So you might have allowed for greater within your contract or in an EBA, for example. But this is the minimum that is eligible for all employees right across the nation. So, it shows you, there's some columns, as you can see, there's annual leave, personal leave, etc. Annual leave, for example, it'll show the full-time and part-time employees, and they're entitled to 4 weeks paid leave per year, pro rata for the part-time, and then plus 1 week extra for eligible shift workers. So it makes it clear who gets what and what they get as well. So if you go over to the next column, again, it says that the casual employees don't get annual leave. So obviously, the casual employees get the penalty rate for being a casual, which compensates them for not getting paid leave when they take a day off. And then personal leave, for example, the next one down, full-time and part-time employees, they get 10 days paid leave per year. So obviously the part-timers, that would be based on their standard hours as well. And again, the casual employees aren't entitled. So this is a really quick template to use. If you're not sure, just refer back to this National Employment Standards, and also check the contract/EBA to make sure that it's the same. It cannot be less, but it might be more. So just make sure that you're following that as well.
And I think too, the times we're in right now, the amount of conversations where we've seen companies going, we're going to stand people down, but by their, the government hasn't mandatory shut their business down. So, the terminology that's been used out there in a reactive situation is again not following our best practice. And you'll see down there, like we've had conversations with some employers around redundancy, and I don't want to pay redundancy. What else can I do? And it is about following that process. So it's very important for people who are on this webinar that if you are making decisions, and I've said this in previous webinars, please get the advice from the industry experts, because Google or a friend or a colleague or another person who is not an expert in this is giving advice, and we've already seen it where people have made decisions. And I can tell you, on this webinar, we've advised a company, do not say this in these terminology words, because you can't say this. It's not part of your contracts. It's not part of your compliance of what you need to do, but they went ahead and did it anyway. So, and what we need to understand is through the situation they're in with this COVID-19, as much as an employer, we're trying to get our best way out of it. We've also, so is the employee. They're trying to get the best way out of it as well. And if I use the word, don't follow the right process and you piss them off, then be prepared for some claims to come your way post this COVID-19, because the lawyer firms out there are already advertising. I don't know if you've picked it up, but on TV, through the radio, they are going like there's no tomorrow, because to be honest with you, they're the ones that are going to win out of this situation. So I hope that was very informative. And just to reiterate on that, I think some people just still don't understand what Fair Work do. So there's two parts to Fair Work. There's the Ombudsman, and they enforce compliance with the Fair Work Act related to legislation, awards, and registered agreements. They help employers and employees by providing advice and education on pay rates and workplace conditions. And in today's world, I say this to lots of clients that we work with, your staff members are now more educated than what you are. You need to make sure you're following the compliance. Should something not go right, this is where the Commission steps in. And I can tell you that, they at the moment would be getting smashed with the amount of people that are asking, have I been stood down right? Have I been paid the correct rates? And I think somewhere at the moment right now, a lot of business owners are hoping that job keeper is going to pull them out of the crap, but they still need to follow compliance. So the Commission is the Independent National Workplace Relations Tribunal. They are responsible for maintaining the safety minimum net of wages, employment conditions, as well as another range of workplace functions and regulations. So what's going to happen is, in the situation that we're in, as an employer out there, if you're not doing your due diligence, and I just want to reiterate that, if you're not doing your due diligence and following the process, then be prepared that things might backfire later down the track. Okay, I'm going to move on now to the rostering rules because you know, we have a really good case study of a customer that, you know, they've been in business for, you know, good 10 years. They've been rostering, and you know, they said to us, we know how to roster. We've been doing it for a long time. You don't need to go there. However, we did an audit on their business, and then after the audit, what came out was, okay, well, we don't know how to roster. We haven't been rostering the right way. And now all of a sudden that's created some uncertainty with, okay, what do we do now to fix it? And that's essentially what, you know, we're doing with this customer. So Alison, if you can guide us through this rostering rules, and we've chosen the retail award. You know, it's no different to the hospitality award as well. Well, it's different, but it's the same thing about making sure people are rostered on right, and we're following the compliance.
Yeah, sure. So under the General Retail Award, there's the rostering conditions would be full-time employees can work up to 152 hours a month, and then outside of those hours would attract overtime. So the overtime rate is to be paid at a rate of time and a half for the first 3 hours and double time thereafter. And this is calculated daily. I need to stress daily because some people would, and we've had this with clients, try to calculate it when they're doing the pay cycle. So it's not per pay cycle, it's daily. And I'll give an example of that down below. The first example here is if an employee starts at 11 a.m. Instead of his normal start time of 9 a.m., the employee can finish work at 7 p.m. without being paid overtime. So it's still within the ordinary hours and it doesn't attract the overtime. So that's one example. It also says here, employees who are starting late for their shift or are absent for part of their shift on unpaid leave will complete their ordinary hours for that day prior to the entitlement to the overtime as well. And then example here is if the employee has worked more than 157 hours in a 4-week period, which is more than 152 allowed for, 5 hours overtime will apply. Again, this is where the calculated daily comes in. The overtime is calculated daily. So in this example, we've got that this particular employee did 1 extra hour every day, and therefore it's time and a half for that 1 hour for each day. So it's not 5 hours at double time. So hopefully that makes sense. Thanks, Cole.
And I think this is where, again, we're getting more and more inquiry about these rostering. So this is an area that definitely you and Maya are spending more time in guiding our customers through and what to do.
Yeah, that's right. And each award has its own set of rules as well. It's really important to make sure that you know what award or awards, as the case might be, affect your particular staff, and then refer back to that award. And if you are unsure, speak to your HR advisor because you might think one award and it could be another one as well. So under this particular award, an employee may be rostered to work up to a maximum of 9 hours on any day, with the exception of 1 day a week where they could be rostered for 11 hours. So that's under the maximum amount of hours that an employee could work per day. An employee must not be rostered more than 152 hours per month, as per the previous slide. And here's another one that we found a lot with a lot of clients. They have not been giving 2 consecutive days off each week. So the 2 days off each week can't be, for example, a Sunday and then a Tuesday. They have to be 2 days in a row. If you don't provide that, then the following pay cycle, the following 2-week period, they must have 3 consecutive days off in a 2-week period, unless, of course, they've agreed otherwise in writing, which history tells us most employees say no, they want that 3 days off. So and ordinary hours and any overtime cannot be worked over more than 6 consecutive days. The roster allows for a 2-week roster within this particular award, and as a general rule, it's 5 days per week. They can do 6 days in 1 week, but if they do that, they can't do more than 4 days the following week, which balances it back out. So that's something to be mindful of. And another critical thing is if an employee works regularly on Sundays, they have to have 3 consecutive days off each 4 weeks to compensate for them to work on that Sunday, because they don't have the Saturdays and Sundays off as well. So, and the last important thing to note here is the roster period cannot exceed more than 4 weeks, and this is part of the award as well. Thanks, Cole.
Just before I go on to that, I mean, I did have a conversation with a business owner a week ago, and the strategy they put in place is because of the COVID-19 and having their retail stores open, they've split their teams up into 2 teams, which I think is a good idea, because if one team contracts the COVID-19, the plan is to get their store sanitized, and then the other team can come in. So and then the others, you've got to follow the stay at home for 14 days for those who are affected. Now, this is a minefield in itself. One of the things that I said to the employer was, well, that's great, but do you realise you need to make sure that you're paying the staff the overtime, working 7 days, and they've got to agree to it. And his response to me was, well, surely Fair Work will understand that we're in a crisis situation right now, and they would compensate from that. And I tried to explain to this particular business owner, no, they won't. They won't, because this is part of their entitlements as an employee, and you need to understand that. So am I right in what I've said, Alison?
Absolutely. And, I mean, our hearts go out to all our clients right now, because they're trying their best not to lose their business or lose their staff, and they're coming up with solutions that they think will work. And that's all well and good. But at the end of the day, they still must comply with the awards. The government have announced, and I know that we've just mentioned that the clerical award has been changed. Some changes have just come through, and there's another thing that they're going to bring in. It hasn't come in yet. They're considering putting through what's called pandemic leave, and this will allow a little bit more flexibility for employers with how they can roster or all the conditions for their staff. But right now, unless there's a change that has already come through to that particular award, you must comply with the award obligations as they stand.
Okay, beautiful. Do you want to go through this next slide for us, Alison, please?
Yep. So the rostering rules are, as per the previous slide, if the rules are not followed, employees will be entitled to overtime rates for every hour they work until such time that the condition is met. So what that means is they are entitled to the overtime rate until that has been fixed. So if they need time off and you've not given it to them, they will be paid at overtime until that has been corrected. So bear that in mind. An example here is an employee did not get 3 consecutive days in a fortnight and there's no agreement in place, then he should be paid overtime for every hour he worked until such time that the condition is met. So every day that he works until he gets those 3 consecutive days, he must be paid overtime, not at ordinary hours. That can add up as well. So it's important for each manager to keep their team to the roster, be aware and make a note of when your team members work outside the roster arrangements. If employees change and swap shifts, be mindful of the roster conditions as above. And timesheets need to be completed by employees daily and checked by the managers before sending them to payroll. And cross-check timesheets before sending them to payroll to ensure the hours worked correspond to the hours entered on the timesheet as well. So just do a double check before you sign off on it and send it through.
And I just want to put out there are plenty of professional payroll and rostering companies out there that do it, but they will only process the payroll based on what they're told. And we've already had an incident where someone wasn't questioned, and the payroll's gone through, and now the staff members are saying, well, they haven't been paid correctly, which creates a bit of a nightmare for that particular business. Okay, I'd like to move on to the annualised salaries, and we're obviously on good topic here because our question box is starting to fire up. So this is really good and achieving what we want to do. So maybe Alison, you can take us through the understanding of annualised salaries. And I know you've touched on it, but if you could take us through that, that would be great.
Sure. So the Fair Work Commission handed down a decision last year, which came into effect as of the 1st of March, and it's affecting all full-time employees who are on an annual salary. So it doesn't affect part-time employees, nor does it affect casuals or employees who are paid as per the award rate and paid on an hourly rate. So it's only affecting full-time employees on salaries. And the reason why they brought this in was because there have been so many companies in the last 2 years who have been found to have short paid their staff, and a lot of those staff that were short paid were salary staff, so it could be managers. And then when Fair Work did some calculations and worked out how much they should have been on for the hours that they were working, it came out that they were being short paid. So Fair Work decided to change that and make sure if anyone is on an annual salary, they could have two choices. So one of those would be to do an annualised salary, and that would be broken down into compartments, and the employer would have to nominate exactly what has been compensated for within that particular salary. So we can go to the next slide if you like, Col.
Yeah.
So
we've already seen George is at Columbaris, his restaurant chain be affected. We've seen Woolworths and Coles and Bunnings, and it is happening right now. So it is important that people understand that, and there's certain categories as well, so which we'll go through in a sec, but it's very important that people understand that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alice.
So, no, it's okay. So some of the new criteria now under an annualised salary, you have to inform the employee in writing of the specific conditions. As I've just mentioned, you have to give them a breakdown. So you would need to explain what overtime and allowances, etc., has been included in their salary. You need to calculate the employee's annual salary and notify them in writing how that calculation was performed. So this would vary depending on not just position, but the employees. You might have one employee in the same position as somebody else who is earning a greater remuneration. And if that's the case, then they would have a bigger buffer to be able to work with as to what to allow with regards to overtime and allowances, etc. Specify in writing the maximum of ordinary hours, which would attract a penalty payment, and any overtime hours not included in the annual salary. For each pay cycle, you need to record the employee's start times, unpaid breaks, and have the employee to sign or acknowledge as accurate. This we've already come up with all of our clients disagree with this particular clause under the annualised salary clause, and I can understand why. It's an extra burden on them for admin purposes. The one thing I do say, however, is if they don't keep an accurate record and the employee in the future decides to put in a claim to Fair Work stating that they were short paid for a particular period of time, the onus then goes straight to the employer to prove that that was not true. So unless they've got the evidence, they automatically will need to compensate the employee. So just bear in mind, the onus goes to the employer. Each year or at the end of employment, check that the employee hasn't been underpaid And you can do this by doing a reconciliation. So you need to check to make sure that each pay cycle that they've been paid correctly, and you do the reconciliation at the end of that 12-month period. And if they have been short paid, it needs to be corrected within the next 14 days. And from the 1st of March, a written agreement will be required to enter an annualised salary arrangement, except for the employees covered under the awards category 1, which I think is on the next slide, Cole.
Yeah, what we've done is we actually did a post on this on the blog post on the 10th of February. It's on our website, and people can go to our website and get that information, and it gives you the category 1, 2 and 3, as you can see down below. But my understanding is that Fair Work are going to go through every award and make sure that you know, no one's disadvantaged. Now, I'm mindful of time and we're almost done, and no one's dropped off, which is absolutely fantastic. So we know that this is a good topic. So I just want to finish off with, as an employer, you know, you must comply with today's payroll and rostering conditions under the COVID-19 conditions. So, you know, you must comply. And I know that there's the pandemic leave that's coming, and there's the JobKeeper coming. But one of the things that we've seen right now, which is scaring the crap out of me, and that's why we're doing this webinar, is the governor making an announcement, an initiative, and everyone's jumping on board with it. But it hasn't been passed through legislation yet, and it hasn't hit. So I just, you know, I'll go back to what I said at the start. Make sure you're getting your advice from people who actually specialise in this industry. So to recap your obligations as an employer, you must understand follow the modern awards includes, you know, EBAs, right? You must do that. You must still comply with the NES standards. You must follow the rules of rostering and paying your staff. Now, sure, I've got no problems if you want to put them on 7 days a week. Just make sure that you're paying them the penalty rates that need to come through. And obviously this has created, because we know that the questions are popping in over this right now. With annualised salary, you must ensure that your staff are not disadvantaged. And again, my team and just other HR professionals out there are they're all out there trying to help people get this right within their business. With the COVID-19, if you reduce staff hours or stand staff down or make them redundant, you still need to follow the rules. And I've mentioned in this webinar, and we've seen it, where people, I'll say it, are getting the advice from the wrong people, Google and, you know, information, or from a friend or a colleague, you know, another person in business, and making decisions, and it will come back to bite them should somebody put a complaint in. So I think in challenging times we're in right now, it's a good opportunity to have your staff take some annual leave and long service leave. They are some things that we're recommending our clients. Look at the government incentives as they, you know, may hope you trade through this, but I will go back and say, which I've said in every webinar on this Survive and Thrive campaign, please seek the advice from the professionals. Do we have any questions we want to go on? I think there was a question that came in around, if I put somebody on 6 days a week, do I have to pay them overtime on a Saturday? I think that was one of the questions that that came through. Yes.
Well,
can I? Yep.
Sorry, I'll pipe in here, Cole. It depends on the award. So I'm not sure if you're referring to the General Retail Award. Check the award.
It is retail.
Oh, it was? Okay, so retail is if they've worked the 6 shifts instead of 5, that's okay, as long as they only work 4 shifts the following week. So that's within the ordinary hours.
Yeah, so I would encourage this person to go through our chat box and then maybe have that one-on-one conversation, which is what I'll take you through right now. So we've got what we've set up on our website, which we've had for a long time, but it just seems to be that people are liking this. I think right now, just for a bit of clarification, if you want a 15-minute chat, go through our website, look at calendar. You can have a chat with Alison or any one of our HR advisors there to help you. And I think, you know, from a business owner's point of view, if you want to start having some conversations around you know, how to keep your business alive, and some logic conversations, if I put it that way, because I think, you know, in today's world, we've got to look at logic, but we still got to follow the compliance. Then we're here as a team to help you. So I think, you know, that's really, really important. There are quite a few other questions that have come through in relation questions around the rostering and the payroll. And again, I'm just mindful of time. I think it's best that we go through and contact those people and get back to them. Next webinar, so we've got Easter coming up. So our next webinar is on Monday, the 20th of April, because we're doing one every Monday, excluding public holidays at 1 p.m. I will be going through supporting your customers through these challenging times. So I think one thing that's happened is a lot of companies have been reactive and trying to stay in business, but I think we're now starting to form into a norm. And I think it's time to sit back and really look at what your business model is. This is the work that I love doing in relation to supporting your customers and having good insight, and then making sure that we've got some great foresight when we come out the other side of this. I think it's really important that you start re-educating your customers about your products and services, because at the moment we've been bombarded and everyone's going into online training and online conversations, because that's the way it is. But I think it's important that you still need to re-educate. And I think in times like today, it's that mental toughness of being agile and thinking differently to attract new client opportunities. And I'll give you some tips on how to lead your team through these challenging times, because it is challenging times, and I always say we need to think differently. So please jump onto our series of Survive and Thrive webinars. We really hope this has been very informative for people that are on the webinar. It is a bit of a minefield out there. We're offering free health checks, so people can go online through our website, do a health check. Have I got everything in place? Just to do a bit of working on your business, I think is important. And my team will follow you up and say, well, look, okay, hey, you know, you're going well, or this is some things you need some help with. Lastly, I just wanted to make sure that, you know, we're in this world, and you know, a lot of people saw the Ruby Princess episode last night. It is about making sure that we protect yourself and your family and your employees, and we just want to make sure that we're doing everything, you are doing everything, like we are doing everything to stay safe. So thank you for this webinar. Thank you to everyone for attending this webinar. My big thanks definitely goes out to you, Alison, because you've been fantastic. And we're just here to help, support, guide, and advise clients on what to do to get them through the other side. So thank you very much, everyone.